And here's your moment of metal.
Hey, this is Rick and Lyle, and today we are going to be talking about the classic album Master of Puppets, and we'll also be diving into the tour that was done on that album as well.
Master Puppets, I think they started writing at the Metallica mansion. Everybody knows about that one in San Francisco, their little house in the garage. I think like April 85, they started writing songs for it. Yeah, I heard they've talked about like the garage was really damp and dank, and even worse when Lars like hung his sweaty socks all over the cymbals, shit like that. But that's where the writing started, like April, like right in there, March, April 85, they started writing the songs that became the album Master of Puppets.
Really cool that, they call it the Metallica mansion, which obviously was a joke because the house was this little tiny shitty, house that I'm not even sure if anybody even owned it or if there was, they had rented it from somebody. But I know a couple of the members of the band lived there. There was constant parties and all that. But obviously the garage out back where, Ride the Lightning, well, probably some of Kill 'Em All also was written. And, I don't care who you are, anybody who listens to metal, you can argue it or not. Master of Puppets is one of the greatest metal albums ever written. And, probably Metallica's greatest album. I mean, so some people will argue that and say Ride the Lightning is just as good, if not better.
Yeah, that one was just everything. Everything was just perfect. The songs, everything, the harmonies, the melodies, which was Cliff's was a big part of that. He was like, really into music. He understood music theory and stuff like that from all his music, like his teaching when he came up with the bass. Like even James and Lars both said, he was like like a mentor in the band. If they were stuck at a song, like they would ask him, like, where should it go from here? And Cliff would always have the right answer. And he was very strict, adamant, like strict, he wanted it this way. He would just, we're doing it like this. You got to do it this way. And like they respected him a lot musically. Like he was, big influence on them once he joined the band.
He also took, music theory class in school. He was, Cliff just, his dad, Ray Burton, R.I.P., who actually just passed away recently, just said Cliff, he loved music. He loved everything about it. He wanted to be a musician since he was a little kid, and he made it happen. And he took music theory. He studied. It was a big deal to him. It was what he wanted to do in life, and he made it happen. And he brought a lot of melody, being a very heavy metal and being in a metal band, very aggressive at the time as well. He brought harmonies and melodies, beautiful parts of these songs and just intertwined them into all the metal and just made amazing music that could be super heavy but also really beautiful at the same time with some of it.
Yeah, a lot of ideas came from, watching TV late at night. I think James came up with the riff for Battery. He was watching, like back in the day, it's not like this anymore. Young kids would never remember this. TV used to sign off like early in the morning. It would actually go off the air, and sometimes they would play the national anthem. And I think it was San Francisco, because that's where they were at then when they made Master Puppets. There was some song that they used to play instead of the national anthem, just where the TV station signed off. And James sat there on the couch with his acoustic guitar and would kind of play along. And that's where the acoustic intro for Battery came from. Him just, fiddling around on the guitar when the TV was signing off for the night.
Yeah, very cool. With the different styles too, that's where they got these long songs, kind of like same as Ride the Lightning, just 7, 8, 9 minute songs going on, but there was so much going on, a lot of riffs and the melodies and everything else with it. So, all the guys contributing in their own way. And to this day, even though, Cliff's gone and all that, James and Lars do a lot of the writing. And even though Lars plays drums, he is very good at arranging parts. Him and James obviously write most of the music, or pretty much all of it at this point. But they do, Lars is also very good, though, at just putting parts together, what fits here, what doesn't fit here, what's going to sound better this. They get a bunch of guitar riffs and drum beats and all that and get everything arranged. So it's a lot to do, but they're very good at getting the final product done. But with Master Puppets, it was just on a whole other level, having Cliff involved with most of the songwriting, just because he was just so musically talented.
Right, yeah, like we were saying, yeah, Lars and James, still to this day, they pretty much have the say when they're in the studio, recording, mixing. I know for Master Puppets, when it came down to like the mixing day to get everything done, like it was Lars and James had the last word. Cliff was upset about that. He wanted to be in there during the mixing. But Cliff, he really didn't like recording a lot in the studio. Once his parts were done, he was out of there. He just did not like, he liked to get in there and get it done. Lars especially was the one that would like try to do it again, do it again, do it again. Always, perfection. But Lars and James, even though Cliff was a little upset about the mixing, Lars and James definitely made sure everybody was heard. You heard everybody on there, everything on Master Puppets, what they tried to make the music the best they could. You hear it on there. The production's great, the mixing, everything. They made sure everybody in the band, shined.
They made an amazing album, which going from Kill 'Em All, there was huge leaps and bounds from Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning. And Ride the Lightning was an amazing album. It was the first time where they, even though it was their second album, the songs got longer. There was more going on. They were more intricate. Even their writing process was just leaps and bounds, but beyond the first album. And they had even talked about when Master of Puppets came out, which was only 2 years after Ride the Lightning. They were still learning. And James Hetfield and Lars both said this, that, they were still learning how to get better at their instruments of what they were doing. They were still young. They were still kids, basically. And they were still trying to be better musicians and get better at, playing the drums, being a better guitar player. Kirk Hammett said the same thing. He was working on solos and this and that. And just, they were still evolving as a band and as musicians. So after Ride the Lightning came out, everybody was like, okay, well, let's see where these guys go next. And then the third album, Master of Puppets, comes out, and just they blew everybody away by what they had accomplished in a short amount of time with the songs and just the level of that stuff was just, no one had heard anything like that at the time. Just like when Ride the Lightning came out, Master of Puppets comes out, and wow, they topped Ride the Lightning in a way. Like I say, some people say Ride the Lightning is just as good. I think Master of Puppets is a little bit better, and it's just a classic album. The title track, everybody knows it. Everybody knows the riffs, and they sound amazing today.
So like we were saying about Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All. They got all their practice and a lot of experience off the road touring and studio, way more familiar with the studio from Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning when they went in for Master Puppets, which just, that's the, the album that just is top notch. A lot of people, I think, Master Puppets is the greatest album they ever made. My opinion, yes, I don't think they ever topped it. But that's, when it got to that album, they were already very experienced on the road, playing in front of people, and studio experience. That's why Lars and James became way more involved in the production and the mixing.
Yeah, and for me, before we start talking about the tour, my first introduction to Metallica was on the Ride the Lightning album. And I was probably 14, 15 years old at the time, the first time I heard it, which was around the same time it had come out. And just great story. I remember when Master of Puppets was going to be released, and I wasn't even exactly sure about the date, but I remember, hearing Ride the Lightning and then knowing the next album was coming out. And I was 16 years old at 15, 16 at the time, still in high school. And and true story, I don't know how this happened, but I was laying in bed one night. I had to go to school the next day, and I would always have my Walkman, because we're talking the 80s. I had my Walkman on, laying in bed, and I'm listening to the radio, which was rare because most of the music I liked at the time, there was not much radio play for, metal, a little bit here and there. So I'm laying in bed, getting ready to go to sleep, and all of a sudden I hear Metallica come on, and it's Metallica I've never heard. So basically what happened was there's a local radio station in Las Vegas called Comp 92.3, and at midnight, when the album was going to be released that day, they played the entire album from start to finish over the radio. So I remember laying in bed, and the first song is Battery off of Master of Puppets, and it starts, and I don't know, I just had the radio on just for music to fall asleep to. I would do that. And Battery starts. I don't know what it is. All of a sudden, as soon as I hear the music, and then James Hetfield's vocals kick in, I'm like, wait a minute, this is Metallica, and I've never heard this song. So they got through, I don't know, a couple of songs maybe, and then there was a break. And then the DJ talked about, they're playing the brand new album from Metallica, Master of Puppets, and they're playing the whole thing on the radio. And I just flipped out because I was like, holy crap, I have not heard. This is new Metallica, and it's blowing my mind right now. I'm hearing it for the first time. And I listened to the whole album, which was, I don't know how long the album is. There's 8 songs. A lot of them are 6, 7, 8 minutes, but I listened to the whole damn thing and, had to get up for school the next morning. But and there was a bunch of people at school the next day that heard the same thing, that we were all metal fans or my metalhead friends. And everybody was just like, holy shit, man, did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, I did. So it just kind of a thing I remember from my youth when the album was released.
Same here. Yeah. I was in the Army. I just got sent to Germany in February of 86. The next month, Master Puppets came out. I probably knew it was coming out through like Metal Magazine, Circus, Hit Parader, Cream Magazine. That was like your internet back then. That's how you found out about stuff, bands, interviews. But yeah, I remember getting it, and just being blown away because I already had Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, so I was waiting for this next one to come out, and Master Puppets did not disappoint. It was just incredible start to finish. A lot of my Army buddies at the time, you got to remember, this was the 80s. So they were, really into stuff like Motley Crue and Rat, Dawkins, stuff like that. So at first they really just shit all over it. Like, what is this speed metal shit? They just did not get it at all. But eventually, over the years, Metallica, now they love Metallica. I've talked to them on the phone and they're like, yeah, Metallica's my favorite band. And I always tell them, I remind them, I remember when you were shitting all over Master Puppets when that album came out.
Yeah, and especially during the time, that's what happened. Like I said, it was the 80s, and, bands like Metallica and all these thrash metal bands from the Bay Area and other places as well were coming out making this extreme music at the time when if you want to call it hair metal or whatever else you want to call it, was very, very popular. And I listened to it. So I have no problem with a lot of those bands because I was listening to a lot of them at the time too. I was a big Motley Crue fan and I listened to Rat and Cinderella and all that stuff. But then this speed metal or thrash metal starts to get popular and it's the next level. And yeah, it was a hard adjustment for a lot of people to get into, and some people never did, but for me, it was the next heaviest thing. And, was hooked once I got into it and started listening to it and appreciating it for what it was. So, but then Metallica starts they start the tour for the album, and did they have did they ever headline at all before that? Cause I know when they first started touring on Master Puppets, they were opening for Ozzy, but they didn't have a headlining tour yet. Early on.
Yeah, that's what's kind of unique for me because I wasn't in the States then. I was in the Army. I was stationed in Germany, and Metallica opened up for Ozzy in the States, but over in Europe they headlined. I saw the headline Master of Puppets show, and they had Metal Church opened up for them, so I was able to see the 90-minute headline show as opposed to I guess 60 minutes. Which was still probably awesome. I've heard Ozzy say, when he took them on, that they were a very hard act to follow because they would just get the crowd just going nuts, and they were, he had a hard time following them, but he loved them. He kept them on the tour. He loved what they were doing, which, was big for Metallica because they were huge Ozzy fans. And so, yeah, they were really, really happy to get that tour. Funny note, when Lars... Well, I'm sure Lars and James were probably the first to find out, that they got the Ozzy tour. I think there's a funny story. They were at maybe the Metallica mansion, not 100% sure. And Kirk was in the living room or just hanging out or whatever. And I think Lars was on the phone and mentioned to somebody on the phone, yeah, we got the, the Ozzy tour. And Kirk flipped out, what? How can you not let me, somebody like me know? Yeah, he was that's how he found out about it. What? We're on the Ozzy tour, which was huge for them. And also it was kind of weird for Metallica. Their management, whatever the road management, told Metallica avoid him, stay away from him. We don't want him going crazy drinking. Everybody knows the stories about Ozzy is partying and his drugs and stuff, which was weird for Metallica because they were huge fans. So, that was kind of an awkward, weird situation. They were so happy to be on the tour and hanging with Ozzy, but at the same time they were told like, stay away from him, don't encourage him to drink, and which was weird, weird. And there's one funny story where they're on the road. Ozzy's bus is in front of Metallica's bus. They pull off to like a truck stop, probably take a piss break, get something to eat. Everybody on Ozzy's bus piles out except for Ozzy. Everybody piles out of Metallica's bus except for Cliff. And they go in, we do their thing. They come back. Kirk came back out. He got in the bus. He said Cliff had a big smile on his face. He's like, "What's up, bro?" He goes, "I just smoked a joint with Ozzy." And he was like tripping, like, "Whoa, dude, what the fuck?" Yeah. But there's a lot of funny stories, with Metallica and Ozzy on the road. And that's one of them.
Yeah, a lot of cool, definitely a lot of cool road stories for sure. And, and when they started the tour with Ozzy, like I said, I don't think Metallica had even done like a full headlining tour before this, even on the first two albums. They played clubs, they played bars, nothing big. I mean, they did do the Day on the Green show, for the Ride the Lightning album. Well, not it was a festival, but they played the Oakland Coliseum on the Day of the Green festival, which was definitely a big deal. A lot of people there, but a lot of different bands playing and all that. But as far as them doing their own tour, there was nothing big for them ever. So even when Master of Puppets was released, they were opening for Ozzy. They still hadn't headlined anything. So once they got done with the Ozzy tour and opening for him, that's when they were going to do their own headlining. Like you said, when you saw them in Europe, their headlining tour was going to start, which it did. It started in Europe. And, the Ozzy, opening for Ozzy thing had ended. So, okay, let's get ready to go to Europe. And, this is our headlining tour for Master of Puppets. And most people know, most people don't know, but once they were getting going over there, that's where, Cliff Burton was killed in the bus accident in Sweden, which was September 27th, correct? September 27th of 86. The bus crash happened in Sweden and we lost Cliff Burton. So shortly after, they took a short break, recruited a new bass player, which was Jason Newsted, and continued or got the headlining tour going. So, and they just continued on from there and did their first headlining tour for that album, and from then on.
Yeah, like I had my ticket actually to see Metallica with Cliff when I was over in Germany in the Army, and one of my Army buddies came up and said he just heard on the BBC radio Cliff Burton, 24 years old, died in bus accident. I was just like devastated, like, oh my God, my band is done. And I was at another concert over there in Germany, and I was wearing my Master Puppet shirt, and some German guy came up to me and said, "Hey, are you going to the show?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" You got to remember, this is before the internet, the information age hadn't, happened yet. So I was like, "What are you talking about? Cliff died, and he said, "No, they got a new bass player, Jason Newsted, from a band called Flotsam and Jetsam. They're going to play, in Essen, Germany in January." And I was like, holy shit, I got my ticket for that. And I saw Metallica with Jason in Essen, Germany, January 87. And I don't think a lot of people know, Jason actually finished up the Master Puppets tour. Everybody knows him for Man Justice for All. He, that's when he was his introduction, I guess. And, but yeah, he actually finished up the Master Puppets tour in Europe. I think he also, they played in Japan because they had a lot of dates in Japan, a few dates, I'm sure. And yeah, Jason finished up the tour, and that's when he, was on board with Metallica. Great bass player, loved Jason. He had big shoes to fill, and I think he did an awesome job while he was in Metallica.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough, like, me and you have talked about it plenty of times. I was lucky enough to see Cliff Burton here in Las Vegas. They opened up, this is, before when they were still opening for Ozzy. And I was excited to see Ozzy too. Ozzy was on the Ultimate Sin tour at the time and had Jakey Lee as a guitar player. And I love that album. I love Jakey Lee. That was a great show. So I was excited to see Ozzy, but I was a huge Metallica fan. So I was there for Metallica. I was there for both bands, but I just was so excited to finally see Metallica. Master of Puppets was, my favorite album of all time at the time. And, I got to see Cliff Burton, with Metallica, and even though I was pretty drunk and I was a stupid teenager at the time, I'll still never forget it. And it was a great show, and I was lucky. I feel very lucky and fortunate that I was able to see Cliff Burton play a live show, and never forget it.
Yeah, a lot of people can't say that. Of course, a lot of Metallica became very, very, very popular in '91 when the Black Album came out. Because I've always said there's like Black Album fans, and then you got your hardcore original fans. The ones before. I remember working a long time ago at a casino called Jerry's Nugget, and I was talking to Metallica, some guy that worked there, and we were I don't think we were talking about, I guess, the Black Album, and I told him you should check out the albums before, and he said, "Oh, I thought the Black Album was their first album." Just goes to show you, like, a lot of people out there, just don't know the history and the build up, that Metallica, contributed to as far as metal, in the early, 80s when they came up, and they were definitely, game changers.
Yeah, they made a lot of music that people had never heard before at the time. It was game changing. It was a whole new genre. There was other bands out there like Testament and Exodus and Megadeth and all these other thrash metal bands from the Bay Area and other places. Just Slayer, but Metallica, just with the songwriting, with the style they had, and the talented musicians, they wrote these songs, especially on the Master of Puppets album, that just are classics. They're just instant metal classics that everybody can relate to, and they still sound great today. And even everybody in the metal community, even other bands like today, yeah, that's one of the greatest metal bands ever written, or metal albums ever written, is Master of Puppets. I mean, it's undeniable how good that album is from start to finish. Every single song is incredible, and especially having Cliff Burton backing all of it, and just contributing his. He was so talented as far as when it came to writing, even though he played bass. He wrote so many parts that ended up being guitar parts. They weren't even, he had his own bass lines, but he would write things that would turn into guitar riffs that he wrote on the bass. And, just incredible.
Yeah, that happened, I think, on Orion, the instrumental, which is all Cliff. There was parts on there. I think there was bass parts he was actually going to play the solo over, and he was done. Because I know when they recorded Master Puppets over in Copenhagen, Denmark. I think Sweet Silence Studios, I think that's the name of the studio where they did the album. But Cliff, once he had all his stuff done, he was done. He called his parents, said, "Get me a plane ticket, I want to come home." Yeah, I think there was some parts he was supposed going to do the bass solo on Orion. And I think Cliff, or it was Kirk. I think Kirk said, "Hey, what about these parts right here?" You do. I think Cliff told him, "Go ahead, you can do them. Play those parts on the guitar, those solos." So there's some guitar solo parts on Orion that you hear were actually originally planned to be bass solo parts, and which Cliff could easily pull off because he was kind of like a guitar player trapped in a bass player's body. The stuff he could do was just.
Yeah, he could write guitar parts on a bass, and it would all work.
This was Rick and Lyle. We just got done talking about the Master of Puppets album and tour, and we're going to dedicate this broadcast, our podcast, whatever you want to call it, to Ray Burton, Cliff's father, who just passed away on January 15th at the age of 94. Rest in peace, Cliff and Ray Burton.
Yep, R.I.P. R.I.P. Ray and Cliff. Well, now you're together.
And that was your moment of metal. Be sure to rate and review us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.